roughly 1/10 of the energy we burn as primary energy ends up as useful energy. Now, thermodynamics means that we can't convert all of that into useful energy, but we can certainly massively improve the ratio. So whatever we do, whether we look at a figure like this in which we're trying to reduce emissions from road transportation, we can divide it up into fuel consumption. That means the efficiency with which we use the energy and carbon footprint of the fuel that we're using. So the first is fuel consumption, energy efficiency in terms of taking primary energy and putting it into the actual transport mechanism. There, the big wins lie in terms of engine efficiency, weight reduction, and design including reducing air drag for road vehicles and for air vehicles as well.
According to our ideas now, we have three specific benchmarks in the new transport policy. One of them is certainly the decarbonization. But we also have to deal with the other issue, which is market, internal market. And without a properly functioning internal market, we cannot talk about efficient and proper transport policy and proper transport development being in place. And the third issue is infrastructure. Transport, as I told you, is a rather complex activity where infrastructure, the different modes of transport, the nodes which are ensuring the transshipment of goods and passengers between the different modes of transport are to be at the right place at the right time.
Looking at CO2, has also been decreased by 36% over the last 30 years by the commercial road transport industry. So something has been done. What can we do in the future to increase this even further? Sultan mentioned that we had to get up to close to 100% in the next, let's say, 40, 50 years. So, of course, that's something that we would like to contribute with. The International Road Transport Union has adopted a resolution that we voluntarily commit to reduce CO2 by 30% in 2030. So that combined with the 36% we achieved, we are approaching some figures that matter.
One of the reasons why we have transport growth on the scale we do is because, if I'm being blunt, and it's not a very popular thing to say, but I think it's worth saying, transport is basically too cheap. We don't internalise the external costs of transport. People don't actually pay for what transport costs. In practical terms, what it means is that the demand for transport constantly rise, governments are constantly under pressure to find new infrastructure, which in itself then stimulates new demand. So levels of transport continue to rise. If we're serious about reducing emissions, one of the first things we've got to do is to start to price properly, so we actually start to manage demand more effectively and make sure that people actually pay the proper cost of what their journey is incurring.
We have in place a major European program to harmonize and to go some way towards unifying the airspace. It's called the Single European Sky, and it has achieved the political backing, the legal framework it needs. We're moving into the implementation phase, and things, frankly, are not moving quickly enough. There are enormous savings to be made on all sides in terms of money, in terms of delay, and in terms of environmental impact. And the sooner we begin to see benefits flowing from the single sky, the better.
Tax breaks for aviation. Why is there a VAT tax break for aviation tickets? Why don't we pay for kerosene taxes? Biofuels, and a really important debate. Are we going to include indirect land use change? The fact that if you grow more biofuels, some people will move and remove forests, for example, in order to still grow their crops. Do we include that in the biofuels regulation, yes or no? That will be a key decision to be made in the next year, and it will decide about the question if biofuels actually become sustainable and do something good for the environment and the climate or not. I could go on and on. If you want to really push forward behavioral change, then make the car pay what it does in damage to the environment. So will we have higher fuel prices, yes or no? Take the discussion, upcoming discussion on the EU budget and the structural cohesion funds. Will the billions spent on European taxpayers' money actually spent in a climate-proof way? So help the infrastructure that is connected to the lowest CO2 emissions.
So, efficiency and behavioral change are the most immediate elements that we have at hand to reduce significantly the carbon in the transport sector in Europe. And to answer one of the questions that was put forward before, what can we do with the technology that we have today? Yes, there is about 1 billion cars in the world, but imagine what could be if every one of those cars emit or actually have a CO2 emission in the range of the latest technologies that we have. Yes, if we go further, in the future we are going to have even better internal combustion engines, but with today's technology, if policy can actually facilitate the adoption of that existing technology, the amount of reduction of carbon is going to be substantial as well. Of course, behavioral change is probably the most important. We always tend to say in the office with a bit of humor that we need to change the car, we need to change the fuel, and we need to change the driver. And the most difficult one is to change the driver. So, yes, there should be policies that ask me not to own a car, that I should walk more, and rather than using a car, use more public transport than I use in a car. So those behavioral changes, of course, we have to accept that for the majority of us, convenience is a very important motivator. So we will need actually to be able to create conditions for actually being prepared to accept other ways of mobility that are less carbon intensive.